Hello. So, PMDG have released the 737-900 for Microsoft Flight Simulator, and I thought it might be nice to have a look at it and go through the startup procedure and see if it's any different than the other versions of the 737. I'm suspecting it won't be, but we'll have a look around the aircraft and see what we find out. So inside the aircraft, it looks very, very similar. It's probably identical, to be honest. But I will admit now, I have had a quick fly of it. It is much heavier, and it is very reluctant to slow down unless you use spoilers now. So it's something to be aware of. And on full flaps on approach, the margins become incredibly fine. Anyway, we'll just go and run through the startup procedure for this first video. I'll do a full flight later in the week, but just today I just want to run through starting it up. Okay. So overhead, the same key combinations seem to work, so Control 6 still gives us the overhead panel. So we go and turn the batteries on. That's the first thing we're going to do in the 737. Get some power. Then we go back down to the flight management computer using Control and 3, and we're going to connect the ground power. So to do that, we go to FS Actions and we go to Ground Services and Request Ground Power. So if we go and look outside the aircraft, you will see the ground power unit has appeared, and you will see, there we go, the cable is connected. So in a few moments, this, where it says connecting, will change to release, meaning that the ground power is now connected. Good. So we go Control 6 to go overhead, and we can switch on the ground power, which is the switch just here. We pull it downwards and then let go, and it cross-feeds automatically over to ground power, so we're not just using the batteries anymore. Next thing we do is Control and 7 to go further overhead, and we go and turn the inertial guidance system left and right to nav. So you'd go left one to nav, wait for it to say align, right one to nav, wait for it to say align, done. And then you can turn the knob round on the HDG SDS, and it will tell you how many minutes are left for alignment if you have it on realistic. I've got it set to instant, so we don't have to wait for 7 or 8 minutes for it. Okay, so now we've done that, we can go back down to overhead. We can go and arm the emergency lights. So emergency lights is the big black switch in the middle, so we switch it to the middle setting, which is armed, and close it. We go and turn the window heats on next. It's worth saying I am following a checklist that I wrote up quite some time ago for the other Boeings. I will make it available in the notes. Next is probe heats after the window heats, and then we go back down to the FMC and we program our flight plan. So first thing it's asking for is to enter the IRS position. So we go next page. Oh, sorry, we're on the wrong place. If we go to menu and FMC, first thing it's going to tell us is our nav data is out of date. That's because I have just installed the 737. Yeah, I have not run the Navigraph update on it. I've got Navigraph, so it knows immediately that it's actually out of date. So I would have to go and run the Navigraph Data Manager program to update the 737's internal database of waypoints to bring it in line with the rest of the simulator. Okay, so I can go and clear that message, and it will say enter IRS position. So we go to POS init, we go to next page, and we can pick up the GPS coordinates for the aircraft. That puts it into the scratch pad. Press previous page, and we can drop that into the set IRS position field, which makes it disappear. So our flight plan today is an example flight plan. Let's just go and clear this out where I've been doing a bit of a test flight with it. I'm going to go and pull this back to Nagoya, activate the flight plan leg so you can see it here. So we've got an example flight plan that we're going to program in using Airways just to see how everything works and to make sure it all does work, really. So RJNA is the ICAO code for Nagoya. You can actually see I've got the text version of it written out here, and that should say 26,000 there, by the way. RJNA is our departure or reference airfield. So RJNA. Okay. Then we can go to the route, and we can, so RJNA is automatically in the scratchpad because it is the reference, so we can drop that straight into origin. And then we put in our destination airfield, which is going to be, now I've forgotten the name of the airport already, Matsuyama, RJOM. Okay, so RJOM is our destination airfield. We're not going to use a route. We can put a flight number in. We can just make something up. We can put the runway in for our departure, which will be runway 16. And we go to the next page of the route now. So this is asking for how we are going to get between the standard instrument departure and the standard approach routes. You know, so our route in between. So we are going to go from tell me, so we're going to go direct to tell me first, as far as this is concerned. So TALMI. Afterwards we will go and inject the standard instrument departure that leads to tell me, but this is like from there onwards. Okay, so it's the first one on the list. And then we're going to go to MORVA, MORVA. Then we're going to take Y20 to whack it. So Y20 is the route, so that's one of the corridors in the sky, to WAKIT. It's worth pointing out actually, some of this route is wrong. What we're going to do there is go direct. Because of that data discrepancy, when I did a quick run through of this, that's when I discovered part of my route won't work because the database isn't up to date. Okay, so we've done Y20 to whack it, Y205 to OYE. So Y205 to OYE, which is a VOR station. Then direct to Ituku. So I just put in Ituku. Not in database. Have I spelt it wrong? Ituki. Sorry. Ituki. There we go. And activate the route. Execute. So having done that, I can then go into departures and arrivals and do the rest of that. So I can say I want to depart runway 16, which we know is correct, and I'm going to go on the tell me 4. Yeah, so tell me 4 out of runway 16. So we select that SID. We're not going to use a transition, and we're going to execute that change. Then we go back to the index for departures and arrivals. We're going to go and program this. Normally you wouldn't do this until you're in flight for the destination, but we're going to do it. Runway 14 and the Robin standard approach route. So ILSZ into 14 and the Robin standard approach route, and execute that one. So if we go and look in legs now, because we put the route in, we shouldn't have any discontinuities, and we haven't. It's perfect, look. It's really good. It's already got the restrictions for the SID and star, which are great. Okay, so if we go and look at that route page though, the next thing it wants us to do is the performance initialization. So we go and put in the 0 fuel weight. We're just using the 50% fuel that the simulator gives us unless we change it. So we'll put in a ton of reserve fuel. Cost index, we'll just choose 100. If you've got an operational flight plan, you can read all these numbers from it. You can see a flight level that's predicted there, but we're going to go for 260 and execute that change. Go to the N1 limit. So this governs our climb profile. We'll leave it as reported there. Go to the takeoff, 5 degrees flap for takeoff. There's our rotate speeds. Notice it's quite fast in the 737-900. It's bigger and it's heavier. Center of gravity, we can get it to calculate now. So 5.26. So we need to go and roll this round to 5.26. Just waiting for this marker to get to 5.26. So what we're doing here is trimming the elevators or vertical stabilizer to hold the plane in equilibrium as it travels down the runway, so you won't suddenly get the nose raising or trying to push into the floor as you roll along the runway when you get to flight speed. So essentially you'll be flying at 0 height with the aircraft trimmed for its configuration. Okay, so we've checked for discontinuities and resolved them. The next thing we do is go and look at the master control panel for the autopilot. So we're just going to prepare this for our departure. So if you remember, we said we're taking off runway 16. So we'll go and, as a bit of a backup, set the heading to 160. Okay, we'll set our speed we want to be maintaining once we go to auto throttle. So we'll set that to, say, 200 knots. We'll set our initial climb altitude. Now, this is where you might want to go and look at your initial climb, or ATC might give you it, but remember, if you use VNAV though, the restrictions will be adhered to. So we could go straight for 10,000 feet just as a bit of a reminder to go and turn the landing lights off during the climb out. So we'll leave that at 10,000. You should be able to, if you've got a fully programmed FMC, we should be able to pre-select in here. We need the flight directors on before we can do that. So we'll turn the flight directors on. Yeah. And then, can we now do it? Yeah, we can. So we can pre-select the various modes that we want. So when we switch the autopilot on, we won't have a mad scramble. It's already going to be pre-configured to do most of the things we want straight out of the gate. Okay. So next thing we need to do is set the barometric pressure. So I'm going to use a shortcut here and press the B key. But obviously what you can do is look at a METAR report, find out the barometric pressure and use the barometric knob up here to set it. And you can switch between inches or hectopascals for the scale that you're using. So I'm just going to press B and it's going to change it for the local barometric pressure automatically. And it will do both the standby and the main altimeters for us. Okay, so back overhead, we go and turn the seatbelt sign to on. We turn the chimes to, to auto, chimes to on. We turn the yaw damper on. We turn the cabin pressure to the cruise altitude. So this is pre-configuring the internal pressurization system of the aircraft for our cruise altitude. Then the aft fuel pump 1 goes to on. So the reason we're doing this is to give fuel to the auxiliary power unit. So the APU is a small jet engine in the rear of the aircraft. We just turned it on. And you'll see this little exhaust gas temperature needle started to move. In a few moments it's just igniting itself. That needle will start shooting around to 7. You can see an oil pressure warning. That's absolutely normal, don't worry. This will shoot around to about 7 and then drop back down to, I think it's 4. So there it goes. So if we go and look outside and look at the tail of the aeroplane, you can see heat is pouring out of the tail. That's the auxiliary power unit, the small jet engine. So it can provide power for the aircraft, electricity. It can also provide compressed air to spin up the main engines. So you can see now that needle is falling down. When it comes back down to about 4, it will stabilise, and this centre light on the bus transfer will switch on. There we go. So that means we can now transfer power generation over to the APU. So the centre 2 switches here are the APU, the outer 2 are the main engines. So we're going to pull down on the APU. We are now using the APU for power generation. Okay, anti-collision light can go to on, and we can. Oh, sorry, I should have mentioned that we don't have to turn off the ground power. Yeah, it will. It turns off on its, or it disengages on its own. Obviously it's still running outside, so what we need to do is go back down to the FMC, go to the menu page, go to FS Actions, go to Ground Services, and release the ground power. Yep, so they're going to now disconnect it from the aircraft. So there's a trigger here now. Once we've done that, we'll wait for it to say release. Or sorry, wait for it to say connect, I guess, because it is disconnecting it. There we go, or request, sorry. So there's a trigger here now. We can remove the chocks. Before we do it, what we're going to do is hold the wheel brakes on, so both pedals down, and then we can lift the parking brake. The reason we're doing that is we're now going to ask them to remove the chocks outside, and that is a trigger for the simulator that the doors will now be closed automatically and the stairs will be pulled away from the aircraft. Yeah, so if you were to jetway, it would retract. Okay, so we have waited for the APU to start. We've transferred power, we've done the anti-collision lights. So the next thing we do is go and turn all of the fuel pumps on, because we're about to start the engines. So let's use Control 6 to do this, so you get the same frame of reference that we've seen so far. So fuel pumps are all over here. So they all go to on now. And the centre ones. It's easy to forget the centre ones. Depends if you've got fuel in them. If you're just doing a short flight, you might not have fuel in the centre tanks. But you'll get a warning about that on the EFIS display. ECAM, sorry, I should say. Okay, so next thing we do before switching the engines on is turn the APU bleed on. So that redirects the outlet of the APU to provide compressed air into the main engines to spin them up. So at this point we would perform pushback if we needed to. We obviously don't need to, we're out on the parking space all on our own, splendid isolation. So how do we start the engines on the 737? We choose an ignition system, left or right, and they tend to be used alternately to save with wear and tear. So we'll go for the right one for the right engine, just for argument's sake. We switch the knob to GRD for the engine start, and down here you will now see, hopefully, here we go, the N2 number, which is the gas turbine for engine number 2, the right engine, is coming up. So it's spinning up. And that's the compressed air spinning the engine up. Once it goes past 20%, you can flick the start lever for engine number 2. And that tells the aircraft essentially to ignite the engine and to pump fuel in and ignite it. So therefore you can see exhaust gas temperature raising, fuel flow is increasing, and therefore thrust is pouring through the engine now, and the N1, the turbo fan, is now starting to spin. And you can hear that happening in the background. Okay, so the engine start switch will switch back to off all on its own when it's finished the start sequence. So there we go. So then we do the same for engine number 1, the left engine. So we use the left ignition system. You can use it for either side for each engine. Switch to GRD, which initiates the spool up of the engine using compressed air. So the gas turbine is increasing in speed. As soon as it gets to past 20, we can throw the start lever for engine number 1, or advance the start lever. You can see the exhaust gas temperature is raising, fuel flow is increasing, turbofan speed is increasing. So we're now just waiting. So if we look overhead, we're now just waiting for this switch to go off, telling us that the start sequence is finished. So we'll just give it a few seconds. Okay, done. So at this point we can go back to this bus transfer panel, and you'll see it says bus gen off bus lit up on each side. We can now transfer power generation to the main gas turbine engines away from the APU. So we flick the outer switches and the inner one switches back on, basically meaning the APU is here but it's not connected, because obviously we don't need the APU anymore. So we can switch off the APU bleed now, and we can switch off the APU. Yeah, and that makes the light go out. So we're now using the gas turbines for power for the aircraft. So what do we do next? We go and turn the hydraulic pumps on. So all of the hydraulic pumps are now on, so we have control of the control surfaces. We set the packs to auto, so this is charging the air conditioning system for the environmental control. You'll notice it affects the duct pressure when you turn the packs on. If you turn the packs on before you try and use APU bleed to spin the engines up, there won't be enough air pressure to spin the engines. Yeah, so you have to be mindful of that if you're kind of racing through getting an aircraft ready. You have to start the engines before you turn the packs on. Okay, taxi lights go to on. And we are essentially ready to taxi at this point. So, during our taxi, all we're going to do, we hold the brakes down, and by doing that it releases the parking brake automatically. And we advance the throttles gently. And we are rolling. So on our roll out to the runway, we are going to move the flap lever, which I've just done on my quadrant, to the correct setting, which was 5 degrees in our case, and you can see on the needle here the flaps are travelling. They take a little while to get to 5 degrees. Okay, so let's have a little talk about throttles as we're taxiing out to the runway. So on the 737, it's got buttons hidden about itself for TOGA, takeoff go around, power setting. In which case, you know, the engines will automatically go to full power to accelerate along the runway. And then during climb out, we'll go to N1, which is like maximum continuous thrust. It's kind of what it equates to. I'm not going to do that for this demonstration. I'm only going to go as far as the climb out for today. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use manual throttle during the takeoff run, because I want to show you that actually if you push the throttles all the way forwards in a 737, you can go above 100% on the gas turbine. Or sorry, on the turbofans. You can actually overdrive them. And it will survive it for a good few minutes. Obviously it's not advisable. I just want to demonstrate it to you. Obviously then we'll wind the engines back pretty sharpish and get them, you know, to about 95-96% or thereabouts for the climb out. Something else that's going to be obvious straight away is this is obviously being a 737-900, it's heavier. Also we're going to have to manage the rotate carefully. If we rotate sharply, we'll smack the tail into the ground. Because it's A, it's longer, B, it's heavier. So, you know, you'll be able to establish quite a lot of alpha or angle of attack before it will leave the runway. So, you know, you lift the nose gently and wait for the aircraft to come with you, if that makes sense. Okay, so we've got no ATC, no traffic around today, we're on our own. A deserted airfield at Nagoya. It's almost like they know they're waiting for the disaster to happen. Okay, I'm just going to center our view up so we get a good view of what's going on, and well, actually no, we do want to see across a little bit. Okay, so let's accelerate. So moving the throttles gently forwards. The buzz you heard then was my controllers glitching. So I'm going to hold the throttles too far forwards, look. 103%. Oh my word. So we're going to pull them back gently. So now we're waiting for the V-speed alert. Notice how much longer the roll is on the 900. So there's the rotate. So remember, gently does it. And we're in the air. And Gear up. Okay, so there's no rush to jump for the autopilot. We get things stable. We've got the flight plan here to look at, he says as he scrolls the wrong way on it. Okay, so we can now go for the autopilot, switch on the auto throttle. Remember, it's in LNAV mode. So it's gone to N1 all on its own. So it's using the thrust available to get to the profile. We can lift the flaps now. And it's accelerating towards its climb profile, which is 230 knots for the initial part of the climb. So the aircraft is now doing its job all on its own. It's quite a tight turn. You can see it's actually got quite a tight turn angle going. So there we go. That's pretty much it for getting up in the air with the 737. We should have the landing lights on below 10,000 feet. We can now go and switch on TCAS now we're in the air. We can display that on the main screen with the TFC button, which will obviously show us any traffic around us. But that's it, pretty much good to go. Climbing out, following the profile. In the real world, you might typically find the first few turns will be done by manually before they'll engage autopilot, and I think most of that is actually to do with keeping skills current, and there'll be obviously the commanding officer will be bringing up a co-pilot, you know, who will be training, so they'll actually fly this by hand typically, and it'll be the co-pilot flying and the captain watching what they're doing and assessing them. So there you go. 737-900. It's bigger, it's heavier, it takes a lot more effort to get it to change direction or to slow down or to speed up. You saw it on the rotate. It was very... I was deliberately gentle getting it off the ground, but you could see it didn't want to come off the ground in a hurry. It's not like the 737-600, which is like a jack in a box. Okay, I'll do another longer flight later in the week at some point when I get some time, and we'll look at landing. And yeah, landing is fun because the margins are much narrower with the heavier plane with small wing, same wings, bigger body, so the margins are narrower for approach. You need to be careful. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully you enjoyed that. And there we go. I mean, look how long it is. It's crazy. Okay. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully that was a good refresher if you've not been using the 737 for a little while. Just before we leave you, I guess typically in flight you would be looking at using either progress mode here or yeah, it's saying we need to go and reset the altitude. The message came up, so obviously we've already got to 10,000 feet, so we would go for our climb altitude, which would be 26,000. There weren't any real restrictions on the climb out on this route, which is why we didn't have to really worry about anything. So now we've got 10,000 feet. We turn the landing lights off. We would go for flight level change. It goes to N1 mode automatically, and we're off we go again. I think the transition altitude around here is 14,000 feet, so we'd have a little wait until we switch over to standard barometric pressure, but that's the only thing really left to do. Okay, anyway, I really am gonna leave it here now. Oh, the final thing. The gear goes back to the center position, so you're not charging the hydraulic cylinders on it the entire time during the flight. Okay. It's a wear and tear thing really, so you're not going to putting pressure on the seals all the time, because you'll eventually cause leaks, I guess. Okay. hopefully you've found that interesting, and it was interesting to see the way in which the 737-900 behaves. Physically, it is very different to fly. Like I said, finer margins, particularly on approach. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there now, and I'll see you again soon.